Well guys, today's going to be a pretty interesting day. I might have the chance to weld on a cast iron engine block, but I'm not even sure how bad the damage is, and I've never welded on cast iron before. So we're going to go and check it out right now. I seriously considered whether or not I should even upload this video. I make a ton of mistakes in it. There's a lot of things that I would have done differently if I could, but I can't. Ultimately, I've decided to leave the video up because I think there's a lot of things that younger guys coming up learning how to weld cast iron could take from this video so that they don't make the same mistakes that I did. So that's why I'm leaving this video up. Carry on. Well guys, here's what we're going to be working on. It looks like it's just one long crack going all along the side of the block. Doesn't look like it's going to be too bad. So this really is just one great big long crack along the side. It doesn't spider web out anywhere, which is kind of nice for me. It'll save some time there. I think this might be something I'll be able to fix. So I already talked to the customer. He's going to bring it over to my shop sometime next week. Well guys, we got this thing in the shop. Now the first thing I'm going to do is take a wire brush to it just so that we can clean it up and really see what's going on. So now that we got this thing cleaned up, we can see where the crack ends. And it starts right about here. And it goes quite literally through this little bolt here. I'm pretty sure these were meant for when they were making the castings. They were able to take the sand out of these ports through these holes, is my guess. But if I'm wrong on that, let me know. And then it goes through here. It goes through this bolt here. And it ends right about there. Now on most crack repairs, you're going to want to drill out the end of that crack, and that's going to keep that crack from continuing on and spidering out. It happens on steel too, but it's really common on cast iron and aluminum. I'm just going to take this 1/8 inch drill bit here and drill out right where the crack ends. And that second crack ends right about... You can actually see that first hole we drilled, there's coolant starting to come out of there, which is kind of good. I don't really want to weld with all of that, you know, back behind there. Obviously, I'm kind of asking for it, digging into this dirty casting, but I wonder if I try to take some shop air and I blow it in this hole, if it'll force more out of that one. I might try that. It's forcing more out of its own hole. Well, it's kind of working. I might just keep doing this until I stop getting coolant coming out. I don't know what else to do, but it'd be nice to not have to weld with that jacket full of coolant back there. One thing I forgot to mention is I'm also going to try and use out this new tool that's supposed to make welding cast iron a heck of a lot easier, but we'll see if it really does that. I'm not sure. I'm not super optimistic about it, but I am curious, and it's enough for me to want to try. Now that we have our holes drilled, we can start to groove out this crack, but I'm not going to use a regular grinder to do that. I'm going to use one of those carbide burr bits, and that's because regular grinding discs leave the particles of the material that they're made out of, and they embed themselves into the cast iron. And I want to keep this as clean as I possibly can. Obviously, it's not going to weld great. I already know that. It's a 50-year-old engine block. Anyways, so I'm going to start using that bit to groove this out. It's going to take a little bit longer, but I think in the end it'll be worth the extra time saved. So as I started grinding this out, water was still pouring out of these holes that I drilled. So what I did was I blocked off every other coolant passage port over here with towels. I put a piece of tape on that one there and towels there. And I hooked my air gun up here and, well, oh man, before it squirted a whole bunch out. So, you know, after doing that, there's no more water where that hole was. Same thing over here. And it wasn't just going to drain out because it would keep clogging up with random stuff. I was able to take my pick in there and kind of dig it out. And then that air just helped force the rest of it out. So that makes me feel a lot better. Okay, now I can keep cleaning this up here. You know, I think that looks about good there. Instead of using a nickel rod, which is what most people would probably use to weld cast iron, I'm trying out these Jupiter A rods from a company called Rockmount. I think their company is just geared towards like higher end welding consumables essentially. So I called the guys up there and I asked them what would work for a cast iron engine block. And they told me that Jupiter A was the stuff that I should be using. They also told me that they designed this rod so that you don't have to be super particular about preheat and post-heat, which is pretty convenient for me. It seems like it's going to be a little bit more forgiving. The guy actually told me that I don't need to preheat at all, but the container says I should. So I'm just going to preheat it up to 500 because that's what I probably would do if it was a nickel rod. Especially since this is a bigger casting, I think if it was something smaller, maybe I wouldn't have to do that, but for something this size, I should probably preheat it would be best. Ooh. Now the whole reason for preheating is to keep the metal from cracking when you strike up that arc right away. That can kind of shock the cast iron there and make it more prone to cracking. The other added benefit of preheating is it burns out a lot of the grime and dirt and just junk that's left on the surface of the casting, so it helps it in that aspect too. But I'm just kind of trying to take this torch along the whole inside here, keep the heat spread out, not focused in one spot. Typically with cast iron they say you want to get to about 500 degrees. I'm going to try and get pretty close to that, I think. We're at about 350 right now. The representative I spoke to also said that I should run these in maybe 1-inch sections at a time. So that's what I'm going to do. Whoa. Holy cow. It is not like that. I forgot to talk about it in the video, but I'm using that needle scaler there to help peen the metal, and what that does is it stretches the surface of the weld rather than having the casting stretch with the weld, because that can create more cracking. The needle scaler ended up doing a pretty good job at preventing that, but if you don't have one of those, you can just use a chipping hammer. That looks really cold of a weld if you ask me. Let me try to crank it up a little bit. Well guys, admittedly that was kind of a disaster. So what happened over here was I ground way too much down, and then when I went to put a weld in there, it just blew it all out. And so that's how I'm left with this gap. I might be able to save this though, because I can stack it on top of each other and then lay one nice one to fill in that gap there. Again, same thing here. I had a big gap, but I've kind of learned how to deal with that from what I was doing over here. This seems to be working pretty good, so I'm going to be doing some more of that. And then over on this side is just where everything started to fall apart, because you could see in places like there where I burned through, and there where I burned through, and there was a tiny one there. There was a whole bunch of coolant back there still, which I don't understand how, because I tried to clean it out the best I possibly could. So I'm gonna have to kind of grind all of that junk back off, and then try and lay something in there that works. I mean, so far I'm learning a lot doing this. I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to give this to the customer. If I can't give him any guarantee on it, I won't give it to him. But this is just a big learning experience, you know, at the very least. So I'm going to keep trying it and see if I can get it to work. I don't want to let it cool down too much now. I want to keep working on it. So I'm going to do that for a little bit, and I'll show you guys where I end up at. So I just threw this welding blanket on to help keep this engine block cooling down slower. This thing turned out bad. Once this cools down, I'm going to take that blanket off, and then we can go over why I think those welds aren't going to be sufficient enough for this job. So in an hour or two, I'll come back out here and I'll show you guys what's up. Well guys, it's been a couple hours. We can probably take this blanket off now and see where exactly I went wrong. I'm not going to be one to make excuses for myself, but I think the biggest problem that I had welding this block was all of the coolant that was still behind here inside, and it was making for some really inconsistent sputtering, porosity right there. and the puddle just wouldn't want to wet out. Like you can see over here, like on this top weld right there, that wet out to the edge pretty good. But over here where the coolant was at, it just made welding this such a mess. And having that massive gap didn't do me any favors either. Obviously you can see it's leaking coolant. It's just seeping out below this weld here and under around here. But the positive thing is I don't really see any cracks. I don't see it cracking along the top here or anything like that. So that is one uplifting note that we could say. But I think ultimately this coolant back here was just a little bit too much and screwed everything up down below. And so that's the reason we've ended up with something like this. So obviously I'm not going to charge the customer for this, but I think this was a really good learning experience and it got my feet a little bit wet when it comes to doing cast iron repairs. Despite the failure of this repair, this wasn't actually a complete waste of time. I was able to try out those Rockmount Jupiter rods, which ended up working pretty good. I didn't have any cracking problems. I didn't have anything like that, which was honestly my biggest concern. Looking back in hindsight now, there's a couple things that I should have done differently. Number one, I shouldn't have ground it down as far as I did. Because the second I did that and I struck an arc, it burned through it and created a massive hole. So I really should have not beveled it out as big as I did. I already told the customer that I couldn't promise him anything. I told him I'd give it a shot. I thought, there was a chance that this could have went differently, but I don't think the customer is going to be too upset. He said if this motor doesn't work out, then he's got another one that he's going to put in there. He just wanted this one fixed because it was a numbers matching thing and he wanted to, get that together. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it happen. Hopefully you guys can learn from some of the mistakes that I've made here today. And if you have any tips or any suggestions on things that could help me out when it comes to welding cast iron like this, I am all ears, believe me. If you liked it, be sure to let me know down in the comments below. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.